Let them eat cake. Let them eat fake cake. Teach them globe-centered evolution. Have them hear or say 50 Shades of Gray. My willingness to comply depends upon whom is asking and why. Welcome, everybody, to Mudflood was Armageddon. The Mudflood was the Armageddon. Don't let them tell you anything else unless they are willing to debate you in a fair, non-violent way. Where is my thing? You know what? Give me 1 second here. This was a hassle last night, and it seems like it's a hassle today. I do not know why I have to dig now the last couple of shows to show the disclaimer. I have them usually pulled up down here. Now, it was up, I think I had two. Sometimes when you forget to close out a picture, it stays active. Now, am I sharing the screen? I want to be. So there I am. Hola, God bless. Thank you, Luther the Truther. Think you'll be happy enough if you stick with this. And is it suffering? What happened the last couple of years? Sri Lanka was taken over by the youth, riled up by the social media. Bangladesh and Nepal, these are countries that have new governments because the Gen Z protests are and were spreading. In the meantime, we're going, this is an extension of the 2008 warning signals. You don't just lose 911,000 jobs by accident or round it up so you get that even number. That's where we are right now. I would have should I have said 332 on the thumbs up? I didn't see it. So in the middle of a country that is in the middle of nowhere is the Statue of Liberty. Supposedly 1925, time to free the slaves. So much for it being a man in their world. Like some people say, our Statue of Liberty is a man. 1925. We'll find out about this mountain of silver. Some sort of religious thing, motif. Did they dress this guy the same? That's what they want to know. They think that Mangione and dressed like Lee Harvey Oswald attempting to send the signal he's a patsy. I don't know. I believe he's some sort of setup. This Anne Heche, who knew that would be such an interesting topic? Ellen, girlfriend of Ellen, saw a weird video about it. A ping pong in the book of Lolita, Stanley Kubrick, that never goes away, does it? He wants to play ping pong. This sheet, they reminded him of a Roman senator, the man who did the video. What's this? September 10th, the day before or the day of the recent Charlie Kirk assassination, the Republicans blocked By one vote, they missed a chance to release the Epstein files, but we missed it. We were busy that day. Debased silver. Now, there was a financial crisis, an economic crisis that occurred in what they're calling 33 AD. It happened in the Roman Empire. Our Messiah, the Christ, lived in a part of the Roman Empire. Not a fan. The crisis was eventually resolved by a liquidity injection in the form of loans that don't charge usury in the biblical terms, is what they would have called it back then. It's like you're extracting it. So there was a financial crisis, debasing the silver. Interest rates fell significantly. People were trying to make money. It was the time of the Gentiles, had a little bit of prosperity after the king of Persia and the king of Babylon said, worship the God of Israel. So people did, and it became a money-making den of thieves. Did it not? We don't, they don't say much, and I don't have much to add to this. But it was all built, and their crisis has been compared to the 2008 crisis, Black Monday, the oil crisis. We know it, the fiat money, the end of the Bretton Woods Agreement, the Great Depression again, 1933 solved it, correct? According to some.
What if I told you the most trusted currency in the world once became nearly worthless overnight? Not because of war, not because of conquest, but because of fraud so massive that it helped in bringing down one of the greatest empires of its time. My name is Ari Van Gemeren. I'm a student of history. I run a real estate investment fund, and I am your host today for the Timeless Investor Show, where we explore timeless lessons from history's greatest financial rises and falls, the great operators and builders of the past, and epic investors of today. Today's story takes us to a mountain in Bolivia that produced more wealth than anywhere else on Earth. But that wealth...
Are you hearing that? Spain did it before they did Tenochtitlan, where at the same time they were doing Mexico, they were doing, and we think, and we know there's a boatload of gold and silver around here, but it was nothing compared to Bolivia.
Spanish in the New World, Hernan Cortez encounter with this fundamentally different and sort of alien culture to this very staunch Catholic warrior culture of Spain, these epic tales of him entering the Aztec temples and thinking he'd found himself in a den of devil worshippers. And yes, I know, the European arrival to the New World was an unmitigated disaster for the people.
So what do you do as a good Christian when you come to what is a den of devil worshippers? Do you witness the gospel to them through tyranny and oppression? To the Spanish, yeah, that's the answer. You killed 90% and convinced the rest of them that you got the right religion now, baby. Roll.
People already there. But it is nonetheless an interesting period. In fact, somebody should probably write something about how the Aztec Empire essentially dissolved from within, surrounded by rival nations.
People always wonder about that. How did Cortez take over? Well, the local indigenous were afraid of the Aztecs. The Mayans were, kind of like a lot of Native Americans in the United States, which used to be Egypt, were afraid of the Apaches and the Sioux because the Lakota were given horses, and they decided, cool, let's raid the other villages and take everything. That's why they were called snakes in the grass. There is no real good guy, no good race. There are people who can be called on the narrow road, and everyone else. Jumping ahead a little bit, what do you got, Guy? Go.
Empire leverages itself to the maximum based on the assumption that the good times will last forever. And unfortunately for the Spanish, it's not totally their fault, right? There was fraud, but it's sort of their fault. And by the way, the armies in the Netherlands being unpaid, we hit on that in the sack of Antwerp. Those armies were unpaid. There's some parallels there. Watching this unfold. You've got armies fighting in multiple theaters. You've got fleets to maintain across the Pacific. You've got a massive bureaucracy to fund. You have a global church to defend. And all of it depends on credit backed by silver that people are now refusing to accept. Remember, they were not just living off silver production. They'd already spent next year's silver. And the year after that, Italian bankers had been happy to lend against future shipments because Spanish silver was the most trusted currency in the world. But when that trust evaporated, so did the credit. And overnight, Spain went from being the richest empire in history to being unable to pay its bills. The army in the Netherlands, unpaid. The treasure fleets, no money to outfit them. The colonial administration, collapsing. This is what happens when an empire leverages itself to the maximum based on the assumption that the good times will last forever. And unfortunately for the Spanish, it's not totally their fault, right? There was fraud, but it's sort of their fault. And by the way, the armies in the Netherlands being unpaid, we hit on that in the sack of Antwerp. Those armies were unpaid. There's some parallels there. The army sacking Antwerp, destroying a center of finance in the Low Countries. Why? Unpaid. Was it related to this? I think
so. We'll get back to this, but we know that they all lived in conquered star fort cities. We see them today. 5 occurrences of well done. That was an important ending to last night's ministry. Well done. It is what you want to hear. I went over the 4 things Gentiles are forbidden from. They studied it. There are clearly the Jews had to keeping the law. They had to do the biblical law. Gentiles who converted were told that they must abstain from eating food offered to idols, from consuming blood or the meat of strangled animals, that's 2 and 3, and from sexual immorality. If you do this, you do well, and you will hear, well done, my good and faithful servant. Those are what is clear. Now, some people told Jesus that he didn't even know the law, and that he wasn't the light to the Gentiles, and that his disciples were breaking tradition. Jesus told them, you nullify the word of God by your tradition. Roman Catholics do that today, promoting the Trinity, having drawn and flayed people, Spanish bloody inquisitions, and yet we want to ecumenical with them and the Mormons, and it's happening now. He cast forth his ice like fragments, stretching out a measuring line. He assembled the boundaries by lot. Let me read that verse. Others will set your boundaries then. Therefore, you will have none to cast the line by lot in the assembly of the Lord. Closing out the Bible, that's where they were at. We might come back to that. How do families work together? Well, sometimes peacefully and happily.
They mainly feed on trees like arjun and asan, which are native to Indian forests and are found in abundance. These areas are protected by the country's government and require a permit.
they're protected by the governments. They weren't. How did they get these things? What's up with this type of silkworm?
Species. Around 350 to 400 of them can make a beautiful Indian sari known as tussar silk that offers a luxurious fabric as well as a bit of rustic appeal. Produced mainly in the eastern regions of India, including Bihar, Jharkhand, Odisha, Chhattisgarh, and West Bengal, very little is known regarding the time of its origin.
Well, I would say it came from a time when they couldn't control the inlands, but they controlled the ports. The English, the Dutch had taken over somebody. And so people were just living the lives of after Armageddon. When another church came in at the end of the golden age that was ruled with a rod of iron, doing what they do. They were tares. Wheat and tares called for the mountains to save us from this wrath that is here, not coming, but it was there. Here's about the silkworm.
Eggs and place them on fresh leaves. Once the larvae hatch, they feed on leaves and grow rapidly. These specific creatures are biologically recognized as Antheria myleta, and myletas eat a lot. So much so that they have to be transferred from one tree to another.
I would guess this would have been considered communism because they grow them and then they don't boil them. They let them hatch and come out. So they can reuse
now, pure tussar is made using undamaged cocoons, which means the larvae die inside. On the other hand, tussar gika is the one in which the moth makes a hole at the top of the cocoon and breaks out, and therefore is unharmed. The moth flies out and goes on to mate and produce more eggs, and more importantly, it's free. This is why tussar silk has earned the name no violent silk. This is also why there has been a renewed interest in it by designers and textile enthusiasts, as it offers ethical practices in fashion and it's environmentally friendly.
So that's good, but the whole village for hundreds of years worked together and they were proud of it. You know, some people spun the thread in this town.
India, where thousands of families are involved in tussar silk production. It starts with the boiling stage. The cocoons are soaked in warm water. It's done using a mixture of soda.
I want to show you how much they fit in the pot.
As it softens the sericin, a natural protein that binds the silk fibers together. This helps the silk thread to be unwoven easily. If the cocoons are not boiled optimally, it can cause problems during the later stages of the silk.
Down.
ये जो काम है पूरा फैमिली मिलकर ही करता तभी पॉसिबल है. अगर चाहिएगा कि आप अकेले कर पाइएगा तो थोड़ा सा बहुत हार्ड हो जाता है ये काम. सब मिलकर करते हैं थोड़ा सा आराम लगता है. ऐसे लगता है कि नॉर्मली आसान काम है, घर में बैठ के कर लेते हैं, लेकिन सब मिलकर करते हैं तब आसान है.
Next is the reeling stage, where the silk fibers are carefully taken out of the boiled cocoons.
She's proud of what she does because most women don't have the patience to do it.
These fibers are stifled together to form a thread-like string. Reeling is only done by the female members of the family.
अगर कोई लेडी जगह तैयार करती है तो 40 से 50 ग्राम से ज़्यादा तैयार नहीं कर पाएगी. और ऐसा होता है कि ज़्यादातर नहीं, मतलब लेडीज नहीं करना चाहती, इसलिए उसके लिए मशीन मतलब उपलब्ध कराया जाता है कहीं पर. हमारे यहाँ नहीं है अभी, लेकिन लेडीज लोग मतलब पैसा के लिए.
So the less than 2 ounces a day, but it's families working together using the same technology, the flying loom. Look at, can you imagine working with your husband all your life like this?
Width. The yarn that passes horizontally across the fabric roll is called weft. It manages the horizontal pattern. The weaving requires skilled craftsmen who often use traditional hand looms. Together, the
I'm not offering you an easy life. I'm saying you'd want to be blessed and make it. Live through what is coming. Realize white people will kill white people when they don't think they're white enough. It happened to the Germans. And the Germans in the English Boer War was where they invented the concentration camp. Do your own research. You don't have to trust me.
Exposure are rife among them, and unless immediate steps are taken for their relief, many will certainly succumb to their hard life. The government was compelled to step in and provide emergency assistance. But after these initial trials, Herman and Marie, like other settlers, began to prosper through sheer hard work and determination, establishing themselves as successful farmers and growing their family. The Settlers' Monument on the East London...
Well, that's not going to work. Oh, yeah, so they had to have a war.
War has broken out in South Africa, and British commanders are confident they will soon crush the upstart Boer republics who have dared to defy them. General White's troops, facing Boer positions on the high ground near Ladysmith, wait nervously as British and Boer artillery duel overhead. But the neighboring British units have gone silent, and the order comes to retreat. Boer artillery and riflemen pour fire onto the exposed British troops, and they withdraw in panic. On this day, the Empire has been defeated, but there's a long and bloody war ahead. It's the Second Boer War. Retreat to join the main British garrison.
They didn't teach them a good enough lesson the first time, so this time they were going to starve them into submission. You got any concentration camp here? Go.
This relentless scorched earth campaign destroyed thousands of Boer farms and made about 150,000 civilians homeless. Kitchener also introduced the blockhouse system to limit Boer mobility. Blockhouses were small, easily constructed pillboxes manned by 8 soldiers. The British built 8,000 blockhouses along rail lines and opposite river crossings. Each blockhouse was linked to its neighbors with wire obstacles, creating a permanent, defended barrier which greatly hindered Boer movement. As with all guerrilla wars, the fighting was prolonged and brutal.
That's a grave, a mass grave. White people burying white people.
And both sides inflicted cruelty on the civilian population. Boer commandos plundered African villages and pro-British farms for supplies, and the British burned down Boer farms. Combat between Boer guerrillas and British columns usually took the form of ambushes and was often close-ranged and exceptionally violent. The Boers looted dead or captured British.
It seemed like they had to. It wasn't necessary to be nice. It was necessary to be violent.
Considered a refugee camp system for displaced Boers in May 1900 and set up several ad hoc camps. Kitchener made the system official in December 1900 as his scorched earth policy created thousands of additional refugees. And the concentration camp system was born. The British initially intended the camps as refugee centers that provided accommodation.
I'm sure that was their intention, but we know what happens. It does seem inevitable now in hindsight. Let's look at the Potosi mine. Great fraud. We'll look at that. So we'll start with the mountain that ate 1 million people. And it had so much silver, Spain went nuts, was able to afford invading Mexico and everywhere. And the reason they did it was debt. Debt caused by usury that made them debase the silver. It was a star fort. And they didn't care if they had to work 1 million potential converts. That's high. That's way up there. Made of silver was the propaganda. They used mules. They would have had to. Famous for its well-preserved colonial architecture. Well, they would say, we got to clean up these buildings and mark them up and import some terracotta things to slap on cover up the fact that they only were occupying previously occupied cities because there was already silver there. They know where it is. And this is the mine where I showed you the video. They were debasing the silver.
So think about what happened next. If you were a merchant in 1640 and you heard that Potosi coins might be fake, what would you do? You'd stop accepting them, or you'd demand a discount. Better yet, you'd insist on
Is that millennial gray?
coins from trusted mints or pure bullion you could verify yourself. And this is exactly what happened. Potosi coins began trading at a discount. Then other Spanish coins became suspect too. If officials could debase coins at Potosi, who's to say it wasn't happening somewhere else? Merchants started rejecting Spanish currency entirely in favor of other options. The most trusted.
Well, you know what the option would be? Eventually have an entire flat earth be comfortable with fiat money. Oh, wait, mission accomplished. So we had that Bible verse. We looked at Potosi mines. I'm going to close that. The national mint of Bolivia. Boy, those pieces of 8, the Spanish coin, that was for hundreds of years. And then some bad bureaucrats started clipping the coins. They were minted here, they say, during what would have been not the Dark Ages, the Golden Age past, that was ruled with a rod of iron because it was populated with wheat and tare, wolves, and real sheep, who all had to pretend to be ruled, and Christians. They were ruled with a rod of iron. Some went very bad. It was the first mint. It funded Columbus and everyone else. All the nations we know of were somewhat a result of Spain fighting England. Is it going to be a corrupted Trinitarian Protestants or corrupted Trinitarian Roman Catholics? These are found everywhere in the world. We can trace their technology. It seems very easy. Now, there was that right before what they would have been on the Julian calendar. So 1666 would have been their equivalent to what we consider now 1711, the 290 years before September 11th, 2001, leaving the 45 years for those who survive. Blessed are those who make the 1335. But history does repeat, and it comes down to, do you trust the governments and their money? And obviously we don't anymore, but we're pretending we do because that's how we buy our food at the Albertsons or Safeway or Piggly Wiggly. Yeah, there are still some Piggly Wigglies. Ask RJ. Ask RJ. He has a funny name for it. I think it's funny. I use it. So these guys, and it's all about silver, man, and keep it honest. Trust your government. Yeah, Spain was mad when the king found out you did what to our money. He caught him and killed him. But the money was, wow, already debased. Look, that's one of the Star Fort mines back in the day in 1741. One of the, look, this is how you defend a mine where you send 1 million people to die. Cartagena, Oh, wait, this is in Colombia? Well, mining was very important to Spain. They were borrowing money to fight Napoleon. Those French, they wouldn't let it go. And the English, they didn't care about what was going on. Spain claimed that. Then they came down here, divided it on the Mississippi. France got it, then they didn't want it. Weirdness going on, right? All leading to this debased money. And where did the Roman Catholic monarch start? Right here. And then she married the King Ferdinand II. So she became queen of both countries. Marriage, joint rule marked the de facto unification of Spain, not de jure, de facto. They were in fact unified. De jure would mean they were legally unified. So these people were probably later, they're people we know. They did it. Under canon law? So they got in debt. They needed money. They were going to fight in Europe. So they, as Christians, went over to convert those people by murdering them. And then, well, Satan had a plan also. In this era, it was use these people. Cartagena, Colombia. Somehow, like Hernando Cortez and La Menche, they take the Spanish guy and turn him into a kind of a hero in a way. Look what they did. They left us star forts, and when they declared independence, you just keep on going. They're right. He was a Mason. They had secret societies. They always had a woman that helped them. How could they do it without her? Look at this. This is another one. So I have a list now of like Sacagawea, La Mancha. This is the India Catalina de Cartagena. How could they have done it without her? They're only recently discovering, sure, they killed everybody else, but they picked some cute ones. And, she's 14, 15. Let's use her as a concubine interpreter. Well, nowadays, let's make her into a hero. She's a hero. And there are many of them. Here's your categories of how many there are in different parts of wherever the Catholic monarchs sent their people who wanted to get rich. They always needed a 14, 15-year-old girl to rape and to interpret for them, and then nowadays be brought up to that. Well, she was a Renaissance woman. She knew what she had to do, so if she had to give it away to live, she made sure her children lived good after that. It's what I'm discovering is the secret of modern Renaissance education. Until they get every woman to believe abortion should be legal, they will not be happy. That because when that happens, then since abortion breaks all of the commandments and leaves the man out of the picture, it makes women gods. Because even in this country today, if a woman gets pregnant, she could say, I want an abortion or I do not. And the man has no choice. That's their goal. That was their goal. And they, like George Bush, can say, mission has been accomplished. So they're all there. Here's one or two of them. One of the consistent things about some of them all of those countries had other women who had visions of Mary. This is only one of those who had visions of Mary, Marian apparitions, and even like some demonic people who worked for Pharaoh could throw a rod on the ground and turn it into a snake. If it hadn't have been that Aaron's snake ate the other one, there would have been no proof of the greatness of our God. This is how they promote the Trinity. This is what the Roman monarchs do. It's what they want people to communicate into today. Join them. They had private revelations that said, sorry, they killed 90% of our people, but it turns out their religion is true, and we should have no objection to subjection. We should have nothing and be happy because our God is real. Sure. So it depends on the deposit of faith that the Roman Catholics say. Even some of the more liberal call it a deposit of faith. The deposit of faith is what Roman Catholic monarchs like Isabella et al. Were using to say, we have the scripture and our tradition, and they are the same, because Paul said that there was a tradition that we should trust. And so they call it a deposit of faith. And when you're going to be saved in their new ecumenical tradition, you will have the deposit of faith imposed upon you. The Catholic Church theology exhorts the faithful to stand firm, hold fast to the traditions that you were taught by us. Well, that's including their deposit of faith. It is their sacred traditions. Orthodox Church has them, everyone has them. Well, there are 4 traditions. Don't eat meat sacrificed to idols or the blood. Don't eat the food that has been strangled. And for goodness sake, for righteousness' sake, flee all unmarital sex. They considered it their oral tradition, their sacred tradition. It is what Lord Messiah fought against. It is what they support. What is being exposed? Now, look, this is a computer with only 109 subscribers. It started out mocking the guy. It sounds like the guy from the financial thing with the whole, suppose I told you thing. And yet, truth revealed is AI so desperate for hits and clicks to prove itself worthy, it is now exposing some of the truth? Go.
What if I told you that some of the most important medical discoveries in American history were not built in clean, white laboratories, guided by truth and compassion, but were instead built on silence, lies, and cruelty? What if I told you that for centuries, entire groups of people, African Americans, Native Americans, the poor, immigrants, prisoners, even soldiers sworn to serve their country, were used as test subjects without their knowledge? What if I told you that their suffering became the foundation for medical progress that others benefited from, while they were left behind in pain, broken, or even dead? We like to imagine that medicine is a story of hope and healing, of brilliant minds defeating disease and saving lives. But in America, that story is complicated by another truth, a darker truth where medicine was also a weapon, where science advanced not with consent, but with coercion.
I would posit it is still a weapon.
Tonight, we are uncovering one of the most disturbing legacies in American history, the long and hidden story of medical experiments on marginalized people. Most people know the name Tuskegee. They know, and when human rights were reserved for some, but not for others. Enslaved Africans were among the first to be systematically used as teenagers filled the crowded tenements of cities like New York and Boston. They brought their labor to experiment in social engineering, using medicine to reduce populations that authorities considered burdensome. At the same time,
All right. So I ranted on the millennial gray and I wondered, is there a new craze? What could it be? I pulled a yellow vest out of the closet yesterday. And I'm wearing a shirt with yellow on it now. So I typed in, is there a yellow craze? And they said it was going to be everywhere in 2024. It's going to be the color for spring 2025. I like it. I don't know. Are we being programmed and used? We are. Is there going to be a narrow road? Yes. Because from the end to the beginning, this is all a book that has been written by God, spoken into existence. You exist as an battery-operated analema full of infinite Mobius strips. Your mind is blown because you've been orphan-trained brained right here on a flat Earth nation with the Golden Age past. You know it because I've proven the Mudflood was Armageddon. That's why me and my friends are never going to tell you anything else. We are elect. We've been predestined. We've been adopted into the family of God by grace. It's in our best interest to be not blotted out of the book of life and to stay faithful. To do that, those of us who have been called, chosen, and strive to be faithful will never tell you anything else except what I've been communicating. Amen. Hallelujah. Aho. Aloha. Arrivederci. Ciao. Sayonara. Auf Wiedersehen. Nakamen. Adios. Some of you know. I like it. I love it. Just say goodbye.